I've gone back and forth on whether to post this. Not because I'm embarrassed or because I think people won't believe me, but because writing it out means I have to put it in order again, and putting it in order is what makes it the most disturbing. When it was happening, it was scattered enough that I could rationalize each piece. Laid out start to finish, it doesn't have a lot of room for that. This was about 18 months ago. I live in a quiet suburb, kind of neighborhood where everybody has a front lawn and a driveway, and the streets are wide enough that kids ride bikes down the middle of them in the summer. I've been here for about 6 years. I know my neighbors reasonably well. Nothing deep, but we wave and we talk across the fence occasionally, and we know each other's names. It's the kind of place where you notice when something is off because nothing is usually off at all. I live alone. I work from home 3 days a week and commute the other 2. I mention the work from home days because they matter later. The first thing happened on a Tuesday morning in early March. I was at my desk in the spare bedroom I use as a home office, about an hour into my workday. My desk faces the window which looks out over the side yard and the narrow strip of grass between my house and my neighbor Carol's fence. I wasn't looking out the window, just working, but motion in my peripheral vision made me glance up. A man was standing in my side yard. He was just standing there, maybe 20 feet from the window facing the house. Middle-aged, medium height, dark jacket. He wasn't doing anything, not walking through, not looking at his phone, and not appearing to have any clear reason to be in my narrow strip of yard between my house and my neighbor's fence, just standing and looking at the house. I watched him for a few seconds and he didn't move. I stood up from my desk, and by the time I was fully upright, he had turned and walked back towards the street, disappearing around the front of the house. I went to the front window in time to see him walking down the sidewalk, away from my house at a normal pace. He didn't look back. I stood at the window for a minute. My first instinct was that he was checking utility lines or a meter or something, but he hadn't been looking up at anything. He'd been looking at the house straight on. I didn't recognize him from the neighborhood. After a few minutes, I went back to my desk and got back to work. And by that afternoon, I had mostly set it aside. Strange but not alarming. People cut through yards. People stop and look at houses for all kinds of reasons. I didn't think about it again for almost 2 weeks, I'd say. The second thing happened on another work from home day, Thursday. I was in the kitchen making lunch around noon and I heard something at the back of the house. A light sound, brief, like something contacting the back door. Not a knock, more like a single quiet tap or the sound of a hand testing a handle. I went to the back door and looked through the small window set into it. Nobody on the back step. I opened the door and looked out at the backyard. Empty. I checked the door handle. Locked as it always was. I stood in the doorway for a moment, looked around the yard and went back inside. That evening I mentioned it to my neighbor Tom across the street when I saw him getting his mail. I described the man I'd seen in the side yard 2 weeks prior. Dark jacket, middle-aged, medium height. Tom thought about it and shook his head. Didn't ring a bell. He asked if I'd seen anything else, and I told him about the sound at the back door that afternoon. He suggested it was probably an animal, like a raccoon or a stray cat bumping against the door. I nodded and said he was probably right and went back inside. I want to be honest about my state of mind at this point. I wasn't scared, but I was mildly alert in the way you get when a couple of small things happen close together, but I wasn't reading it as a pattern yet. I checked my locks that night before bed the way I always did, maybe with slightly more attention than usual, and slept fine. The third thing happened 11 days later. Another work from home day. I was on a video call in the late morning, sitting at my desk, and about 20 minutes into the call, I happened to glance at the window again. The same man was in the side yard. Same spot as before. Same dark jacket. Same stillness, looking at the house. I kept my expression neutral because I was on camera and kept talking for about 30 seconds before I excused myself, said I had a quick situation to deal with, and muted myself. By the time I got to the window, he was already moving, the same as before, turned and walked toward the street without hurrying. I went to the front of the house. He was already at the end of my block walking away. I called the non-emergency police line. I described the man and gave them both dates and the approximate time of the most recent sighting. The officer I spoke to was polite and took the information down. He said they would have a patrol car do some passes through the neighborhood and that I should call back if I saw the man again or if anything else happened. He asked if anything was missing or damaged. I said no. He said to make sure my doors and windows were locked and to consider a doorbell camera. Thanked him and hung up. I ordered a doorbell camera that afternoon. It arrived 2 days later and I installed it myself. Front door coverage, pretty wide angle, motion activated. I also bought a separate, smaller camera for the back door that I mounted above the frame, pointing down at the back step. Both are fed to an app on my phone. I felt better almost immediately after installing them. Whatever this was, I'd have something concrete next time. For the next 3 weeks, nothing happened. The cameras picked up the usual things. Carol's cat crossing the front walk, a delivery driver, and a kid retrieving a ball from my yard. Nothing weird. My alertness faded back to baseline. I started to wonder if the man had just been someone passing through, and maybe someone who'd been looking at houses in the area for some reason, and if the back door sound had been an animal after all. But then one morning I woke up and checked my phone out of a habit, before getting out of bed, flipping through the motion notifications from overnight, the way I'd gotten used to doing. There were 4 from the front camera, all timestamped between 2 and 3 in the morning. I sat up and opened the first one. The front camera had captured a figure standing on the sidewalk directly in front of my house. Not on my property, just on the public sidewalk, but stopped and facing the house. The image quality was decent, but the distance and the darkness made it hard to make out details. Dark jacket, medium height. The second notification was from about 11 minutes later. He was still there, same position. The third was from about 20 minutes after that. He had moved to the edge of my front walk, the point where the public sidewalk meets the path up to my front door. He was standing at the boundary of my property, looking up at the house. The fourth was about 5 or 6 after that. The front walk was empty. I sat in bed with my phone for a long time. 4 motion captures spanning almost 40 minutes. Between 2 and 3 in the morning, of a man standing outside my house in the dark. Not on my property until that last position, but working toward it incrementally over the course of those 40 minutes. I called the police again, this time the non-emergency line, and then sent the footage directly to the email address the officer gave me. A patrol car came by within an hour. 2 officers looked at the footage on my phone, took copies, and walked around the exterior of the house with me. Everything was locked and undisturbed. They told me to keep the cameras running and to call immediately if I saw the man in person again. I asked them directly if they thought I was in danger. One of them paused before answering and said that the behavior was consistent with somebody who was casing the property. I appreciated the honesty. I didn't sleep well that night though, or the several nights after. A little over a week later, on a Saturday morning, I came downstairs to make coffee and found my back door unlocked. I stood in the kitchen staring at it. I had not used that back door in over a week. I checked the back camera app immediately. The footage from the previous night showed nothing. No motion alerts, no figures. I went to the door and looked at the frame and the lock mechanism closely. There were faint scratches around the keyhole that I could not say with certainty were new. They could have been there for months without me ever noticing. I called the police, and this time I asked for someone to come out. An officer spent about 45 minutes at the house. He examined the back door lock and said the scratching was consistent with someone attempting to pick or manipulate it. He could not say definitively when it had happened. He could not say whether whoever it was had successfully got inside at any point. Nothing in the house was visibly disturbed. Nothing was missing, but the lock had clearly been worked on. The officer recommended I replace the lock immediately, which I did that same afternoon. I also had a locksmith reinforce the door frame on both the front and back doors. I bought a motion sensor alarm for the back door that would trigger if it were opened. Here's what I think about most when I think about this. Between the first time I saw that man in my side yard and the morning I found my back door unlocked, 2 months had passed. 2 months of slow, patient, incremental behavior. Standing in the yard, testing the back door, coming back to the side yard weeks later, standing on the sidewalk at 2 a.m. for 40 minutes, working toward the door again. At no point in those 2 months did he do anything on its own that would have gotten him arrested. Each individual piece was deniable or explainable. Taken together, they told a very clear story that was only fully visible in hindsight. I don't know who he was. The police never identified him from the footage. It was never quite clear enough. After the lock was replaced and the door frame was reinforced, and the alarm installed, the activity stopped. Never saw him in the side yard again. The overnight camera has never picked up anyone standing outside since. Whether he moved on to somewhere easier or whether something else changed, I have no clue. What I do know is that for 2 months, somebody was studying my house, learning my schedule, and working toward getting inside. He knew which days I was home. Came to work on work from home days when my car was in the driveway, except for the overnight footage. Every in-person sighting was on a Tuesday or Thursday. He knew the back door was weaker than the front. He was patient enough to take 2 months doing this quietly, rather than just acting. I still check the camera app every morning before I get out of bed. I don't think I'll ever stop doing that.